The transport ship Sparrowhawk was falling apart. Fire and smoke filled the cockpit as the small vessel crashed through the atmosphere of a moon called Velenfor. The pilot, Lieutenant Daniel Hayes, pulled hard on the controls, but nothing worked anymore. The ship had been hit by weapons fire from a Vraxian patrol, and now it was dying. "Hold on," Daniel shouted to his only crew member, Specialist Catherine Moore. She was strapped into the seat behind him, her hands gripping the armrests so tight her knuckles had turned white. The ship hit the ground hard. It bounced once, twice, and then began to slide across the purple grass and strange alien trees. Metal screamed against rock. Glass shattered. Sparks flew everywhere. The Sparrowhawk carved along, trenched through the landscape before finally stopping against a wall of black, volcanic stone. Then there was silence. Daniel opened his eyes slowly. Blood was running down his face from a cut above his eye. The emergency lights had come on, painting everything in a dim red color. He could smell burning plastic and leaking fuel. His ears were ringing, but he was alive. "Katie?" he called out. His voice came out rough and weak. "Katie, are you okay?" He heard a groan from somewhere behind him. Daniel unstrapped himself from the pilot's seat and climbed over the broken equipment and fallen panels. He found Catherine trapped under a heavy storage unit that had come loose during the crash. Her face was very pale, and her right leg was bent in a way that made Daniel feel sick to look at. "The Vraxians," Catherine whispered. Her eyes were wide with pain and shock. "They shot us down." "Why would they shoot us down?" Daniel did not have an answer. The Vraxian hegemony had controlled this part of space for 300 years. They were powerful beyond measure, with thousands of warships and countless soldiers. Humanity was new to space travel. They were small, weak, and not worth the attention of a great empire. The Vraxians were not supposed to care about human ships, but they had cared enough to shoot the Sparrowhawk out of the sky. "We sent a distress signal before we crashed," Daniel said as he worked to lift the storage unit off Catherine's body. "Someone will come for us? We just have to stay alive until then." He looked out through the broken front window of the ship. His heart sank. 3 Vraxian dropships were coming down through the clouds. They looked like black knives cutting through the purple sky. The aliens were coming to finish what they had started. Daniel pulled Catherine free. She screamed when he moved her broken leg, but she did not pass out. She was tough. She had always been tough. 3 years they had served together, and she had saved his life more than once. Now it was his turn to save hers. The ship's computer flickered to life one last time. The voice was broken and static-filled, but Daniel could understand the words. "Hull integrity at 4%. Fuel leak detected. Explosion likely. Please evacuate immediately." The computer paused, and then added in a softer voice, "It has been an honor serving with you, Lieutenant Hayes." Then the computer died, and the Sparrowhawk went dark. Daniel picked Catherine up and carried her toward the emergency exit. She was not a small woman, and his arms burned with the effort, but he did not stop. He kicked the hatch open and stepped out into the alien forest. The air smelled wrong. It was breathable, but it had a strange, sweet smell that made Daniel's head hurt. The trees around them were tall and thin, with leaves that looked like purple feathers. There was no sound of birds or insects. The forest was completely silent. Behind them, Daniel could hear the Vraxian dropships landing near the crashed Sparrowhawk. He could hear the clicking sounds of their language as the soldiers began to search the wreck. They would find that the humans were not inside. They would start looking. Daniel ran. He ran as fast as he could while carrying Catherine. His lungs burned. His legs ached. Branches scratched his face and arms. But he did not stop. He could not stop. If the Vraxians caught them, they would die. Half a kilometer from the crash site, Daniel found a cave system hidden behind a waterfall of silver water. He carried Catherine inside and laid her down on the cold stone floor. The cave was dark and smelled like wet rock, but it was hidden. It would have to do. "Let me look at your leg," Daniel said. Thought the break was bad. Very bad. The bone had not come through the skin, but it was close. Catherine needed surgery and medicine and a proper hospital. All Daniel had was a basic first aid kit from his belt and 12 bullets in his sidearm. He did what he could. He made a splint from broken branches and wrapped it tight with bandages. Catherine bit down on a piece of cloth to keep from screaming. When it was done, she was covered in sweat and shaking from the pain. "You should go," Catherine said. Her voice was weak. "Leave me here. Find a way off this moon." Daniel looked at her. He thought about all the times they'd worked together. He thought about the time she had pulled him from a burning building on Tau Ceti, laughing and telling him he was too heavy. He thought about all the meals they had shared, all the jokes they had told, all the long nights of talking about their homes and families and dreams. "No," he said. "I am not leaving you. Danny, be practical. I am going to slow you down. I might already be dying. You have a chance to escape if you go now. Then I will stay and die with you," Daniel said simply. "Because that is what friends do." Catherine stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, even though it clearly hurt her to do so. "You are such an idiot," she said. "I know," Daniel replied. "Get some rest. I will keep watch." He sat at the entrance of the cave, his sidearm in his hand, and watched the alien forest. In the distance, he could see lights moving through the trees. The Vraxians were searching for them. It was only a matter of time before they were found, but Daniel did not run. He sat there in the darkness, listening to Catherine's breathing, and he waited. Because running away and leaving her behind was something he could not do. It was not something any human should do. Outside, the alien sun began to set, and the sky turned from purple to black. The lights in the forest grew closer, and Daniel Hayes, alone and afraid and completely outmatched, prepared to fight for his friend, because that was what humans did. They stayed. They fought. They refused to abandon each other. Even when staying meant death, it was not logical. It was not efficient. But it was human, and sometimes being human was the most powerful thing in the universe. 3 days passed in the cave. 3 days of darkness and fear, and watching Catherine grow weaker with every hour. The infection started on the second day. Her broken leg turned red and swollen. Her skin became hot to the touch. She drifted in and out of sleep, sometimes talking to people who were not there. Daniel gave her the last of the water and tried to keep her cool with wet cloth, but he knew it was not enough. She needed real medicine. She needed a doctor. She needed things that Daniel could not give her. On the morning of the third day, the Vraxians found them. Daniel heard them coming before he saw them. The clicking of their language echoed through the cave. The heavy footsteps of armored soldiers made the ground shake. He stood at the cave entrance with his sidearm raised, knowing that 12 bullets would not be enough, but refusing to surrender. The Vraxian commander stepped into view. He was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, with scales the color of dried blood covering his entire body. 4 eyes looked at Daniel with something between curiosity and disgust. His armor was black and covered with symbols that Daniel did not understand. "A human," the commander said. His voice came from a translator built into his armor, flat and without emotion. "I am Voraxtal, commander of the 7th Patrol Fleet. We have heard stories of your species. Small creatures from a small world. Soft bodies with no natural weapons. Tell me, human, why do you not run?" Daniel kept his aim steady. "My friend is hurt. She needs medical help. If you help her, I will surrender without a fight." Vorax made a sound that might have been laughter. His mandibles clicked together rapidly, and the soldiers behind him shifted their weapons. "You bargain with me?" the commander asked. "You, whose entire species could be wiped out in a single generation? You dare to make demands of the hegemony." "I am not making demands," Daniel said. "I am asking. Please, help her." The Vraxian tilted his head to one side, studying Daniel like a scientist might study a strange insect. "Your companion is dying. Her biological systems are failing. Even our best medicine could not save her now. She will be dead before the sun sets." Daniel felt something break inside his chest. He had known, somewhere deep down, that Catherine was not going to survive. But hearing it spoken out loud made it real in a way that hurt more than any wound. "Then let me be with her," Daniel said. His voice was shaking now. "Let me hold her hand while she dies. You can have me after. I will not fight. I just want to be with her at the end." Vorax stared at him for a long moment. "Why? Why would you waste your final moments with a creature who's already dead? It serves no purpose. It changes nothing. She will die whether you are there or not." "Because she should not die alone," Daniel said. "Because she's my friend. Because that is what humans do." The Vraxian commander made a gesture, and his soldiers lowered their weapons. Not out of kindness, Daniel realized. They were curious. They wanted to see what this strange, soft creature would do. Daniel walked back into the cave and knelt beside Catherine. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was shallow and weak. He took her hand in his and held it tight. "Katie," he said softly. "Katie, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, they were clear and focused, and she smiled at him. "Danny," she whispered, "I can hear birds singing. Is that not strange?" "I can hear birds." Daniel looked around the dark cave. There were no birds on this moon. There was nothing here that sang. But he smiled and nodded anyway. "I hear them too," he lied. "They are beautiful." "Tell my mom I was not scared," Catherine said. Her grip on his hand was growing weaker. "Tell her I was brave. Tell her I did not cry." "You were the bravest person I have ever known," Daniel said. Tears were running down his face now, but he did not try to stop them. "You were so brave, Katie. I am so proud to have been your friend." Catherine smiled one more time. Her eyes closed, and then she was gone. Daniel held her body and cried. He cried like he had not cried since he was a child. Great sobs shook his whole body. He rocked back and forth, holding Catherine close, and let every wall he had ever built around his heart come crashing down. He did not try to be strong. He did not try to hide his pain. He just let himself feel it, all of it, the terrible weight of losing someone he loved. The Vraxians watched in complete silence. When Daniel finally looked up, his face wet with tears, he saw something strange in Vorax 4 eyes. The disgust was gone. In its place was something harder to read. Confusion, perhaps, or maybe something close to fear. "Your species weeps for its dead," the commander said slowly. "We have heard reports of this behavior, but we did not believe them. Such inefficiency. Such waste of energy and resources. Why do you do this?" Daniel laid Catherine down gently on the stone floor. He closed her eyes and folded her hands across her chest. Then he stood and faced the Vraxian commander. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you become a prisoner of the hegemony. You will be taken to a research facility. You will be studied. Your weaknesses will be documented. And when we have learned everything we need to know, you will be disposed of." Daniel nodded slowly. Then he did something that made every Vraxian soldier take a step backward. He smiled. "I want to tell you something," Daniel said. "And I want you to remember it for the rest of your life. Humans do not cry because we are weak. We cry because we have been strong for too long. We carry our pain inside us, and when it finally comes out, it does not make us weaker. It makes us something else. He raised his sidearm and fired. The shot hit Vorax Tal in the shoulder, spinning the massive alien around. Daniel was already moving, diving behind a rock formation as the Vraxian soldiers opened fire. He shot twice more, and 2 soldiers fell. He knew he could not win. 12 bullets against a squad of armored aliens was impossible odds. But Catherine had called him brave once, and he intended to prove her right. He killed 4 more Vraxians before they brought him down. They beat him badly, but they did not kill him. Vorax Tal, clutching his wounded shoulder with one clawed hand, stopped his soldiers before they could finish the job. "Wait," the commander ordered. "This one has spirit. The scientists will want to study him. They will want to understand what makes these creatures fight when all hope is lost." As they dragged Daniel away from the cave, away from Catherine's body, he turned his head and looked back one last time. "I will come back for you," he whispered. "I promise." And somewhere deep inside him, in the place where his grief lived, something new was beginning to grow. Something hard and sharp and patient. Something that would not rest until the Vraxians learned exactly what humans were capable of. The research station orbited a dying star. From the windows of his cell, Daniel could see the massive red sun slowly burning itself out. It was a fitting view for a place designed for death. 6 months had passed since the cave on Valenfor. 6 months of tests and experiments, and endless questions from Vraxian scientists who looked at him like he was a puzzle they could not solve. They measured everything about him. His heart rate when he was shown pictures of Earth, his brain activity when he listened to music, his stress responses when they hurt him. They took his blood and his tears and even samples of his skin. They wanted to understand what made humans different. Daniel learned things too. He learned that the Vraxians had no word for love. They had no concept of friendship. Each Vraxian lived alone in its own mind, connected to others only through orders and duty. They worked together because their hierarchy demanded it, not because they cared about each other. He learned that the hegemony was afraid. A Pakov, Vraxian guard named Kethvar, had become careless around Daniel. The alien seemed to think that a creature in a cage was no threat, and he talked freely when other Vraxians were not around. "Your species is a problem," Kethvar said one day while bringing Daniel his meal. "The High Command has been watching humanity for 50 years. They have run simulations. Thousands of simulations. Simulations of what?" Daniel asked. "Of the future. Of what happens when your species grows strong enough to challenge us." The Vraxian made a clicking sound that might have been a laugh. "Every simulation ends the same way. Humanity wins. Every single time." Daniel stared at him. "That is impossible. You have thousands of ships. We barely have 100. Ships can be built. Soldiers can be trained. These things do not matter." Kethvar leaned closer to the energy barrier that kept Daniel in his cell. "The scientists call it the bonding variable. Something about your species that we cannot measure or understand. You form attachments. You fight for each other. You die for creatures that are not even related to you. Those creatures are called friends," Daniel said. "We have no such word. We have no such concept. And that, human, is why you terrify us. Because we cannot predict what a creature will do when it loves something." That night, Daniel began the plan. He was not alone in the research station. Over the following weeks, he discovered that there were 16 other humans being held in different parts of the facility. The Vraxians kept them separated, studied them one at a time, and never let them interact. But Daniel found ways to communicate. A woman named Lisa was in the medical wing. She had been a doctor on a humanitarian mission before her capture. The guards took Daniel past her cell every day on the way to the testing rooms, and he learned to speak to her with his eyes and small hand movements. Slowly, they developed a simple code. A man named Craig was in the engineering section. He had been a pilot on a colony ship that strayed too close to hegemony space. Craig was clever with machines. He watched the guards, memorized their patterns, and learned how the station systems worked. A quiet woman named Amanda was in the hangar bay. She cleaned the floors and emptied the waste containers, and the Vraxians paid no attention to her. They did not know that before her capture, she had been one of humanity's best combat pilots. One by one, Daniel made contact with each prisoner. He learned their names, their stories, their fears. He held Lisa's hand through the energy barrier when she cried for her patients who had died without her. He laughed at Craig's terrible jokes, even when they were not funny. He remembered every detail about every person, because details mattered. People mattered. He made them a family. The Vraxians did not understand what they were seeing. They watched Daniel's interactions with the other prisoners and wrote reports about it. They called it pack behavior and social grooming and tried to fit it into their models of how species were supposed to act. They did not understand that Daniel was building an army. It took 6 months to put everything in place. Craig figured out how to disable the energy barriers for exactly 30 seconds. Lisa stockpiled medical supplies, hiding them in places the guards never checked. Amanda mapped every ship in the hangar bay and identified which ones had full fuel tanks. A man named Peter, who had been an engineer before his capture, found a way to access the station's communication systems. He could send one message, just one, before the Vraxians detected it and shut him down. What message should we send? Peter asked Daniel through their code of hand signals and eye movements. Daniel thought about it for a long time. One message to reach across the stars. One chance to call for help that might never come. Send this, he finally said. Humans held prisoner. Come find us? On the night they had agreed to call Christmas. Even though it was just a date Daniel had chosen because they needed something to believe in. Peter sent the message. Then Daniel started a riot. The plan was simple. Create chaos. Free the prisoners. Reach the hangar bay. Steal a ship. Escape. The reality was bloody. Daniel was the first to move. When his cell barrier dropped for those precious 30 seconds, he threw himself at the nearest guard and fought with everything he had. He had no weapons. He had no armor. He had only his fists and his rage and his desperate need to save the people who had become his family. Alarms screamed throughout the station. Red lights flashed. Vraxian soldiers came running from every direction. Craig tackled a guard twice his size, knowing he would lose but buying precious seconds for others to escape. Lisa sealed herself in the medical bay and began transmitting the location of every human prisoner to the others. Amanda ran for the hangar bay, her bare feet silent on the metal floors. Peter made it to the engineering section before they caught him. He managed to vent the atmosphere in 2 guard barracks before a plasma bolt took him in the back. He died with a smile on his face, knowing he had given his friends a chance. 7 humans died in the escape. 7 people that Daniel had come to love. He held each one of them as they went. He told them they were brave. He promised to remember them. And when they were gone, he cried for exactly 3 seconds before wiping his eyes and continuing to fight. Because that was what humans did. They mourned their dead. And then they kept going. Amanda reached the hangar bay first. She killed 2 guards with a stolen weapon and began preparing a Vraxian shuttle for launch. When Daniel arrived with the surviving prisoners, she was already in the pilot's seat, her hands moving across controls she had never seen before but somehow understood. Everyone in, she shouted. We are leaving right now. 10 humans climbed aboard the shuttle. 10 people out of 17. 10 survivors who had lost friends and family and everything they knew but were still breathing, still fighting, still refusing to give up. The shuttle launched into the darkness between stars. Behind them, the research station began to burn. Vorix Tal stood in the command center and watched the shuttle disappear into the void. His shoulders still ached where Daniel had shot him 6 months ago. It would never heal properly. "Commander," one of his officers said, "should we pursue?" Vorix Tal thought about the human who had cried over his dying friend. The human who had fought when there was no hope. The human who had turned 17 scared prisoners into a force that had torn a research station apart. "No," Vorix Tal said quietly. "Let them go. And send a message to High Command. Tell them the bonding variable is worse than we thought. Tell them these creatures do not just love each other." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was very soft. "Tell them these creatures will burn the galaxy down to save each other." The stolen shuttle drifted through empty space for 4 days. Its engines were damaged. Its navigation systems were designed for Vraxian eyes, not human ones. The 10 survivors huddled together in the small cargo hold, sharing body heat and the last of their stolen supplies. Daniel sat in the pilot seat next to Amanda. His wounds had been treated by Lisa as best she could, but 3 plasma burns still covered his chest and arms. The pain was constant, a burning fire that never stopped. But he did not complain. He had promised to get these people home, and he would not stop until he did. "How much fuel do we have left?" he asked. Amanda checked the displays, squinting at the alien symbols. "Maybe 2 days of life support. Maybe less. The Vraxians will find us before that if we stay in one place. Then we keep moving. Moving where? We do not even know where we are." Daniel looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were flying. Somewhere out there, families were waiting for the people who had been taken from them. He had to believe that Peter's message had reached someone. "We keep moving until we find friendly space," he said. "Or until friendly space finds us." On the morning of the 4th day, the shuttle's sensors detected something. A massive ship was approaching at high speed, bigger than anything Daniel had ever seen. For a terrible moment, he thought it was a Vraxian warship come to finish them off. Then the communication system crackled to life, and a human voice filled the shuttle. "Unidentified vessel. This is the battleship Resolution, Earth Defense Fleet. We received your distress signal. Identify yourselves." Daniel closed his eyes and let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for 6 months. Behind him, he could hear the other survivors crying and laughing and hugging each other. "Resolution, this is Lieutenant Daniel Hayes. We are escaped prisoners from a Vraxian research station. There are 10 of us. We need medical attention and extraction." There was a pause. Then the voice came back, warmer now. "Lieutenant Hayes, this is Admiral Grace Sullivan. Hold your position. We are coming to get you." The Resolution was the largest ship Daniel had ever been on. It was nearly 1 kilometer long, bristling with weapons and armor, carrying over 3,000 crew members. It was the pride of the Earth Defense Fleet, and it had come all this way because of a simple message sent by a dying man. Admiral Sullivan met them in the hangar bay personally. She was a hard-looking woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. But something in her expression softened when she saw the survivors being carried off the shuttle. Daniel was the last to leave. His legs gave out as soon as he stepped onto the hangar bay floor, and 2 medics rushed to catch him. "Lieutenant Hayes," the Admiral said, kneeling beside his stretcher. "Can you hear me?" "Admiral." Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "We got out. We got him out." "You did. We received your signal 4 days ago. Half the fleet mobilized to find you." She put a hand on his shoulder, gentle despite her reputation. "You are safe now, Lieutenant. Rest." "The Vraxians?" Daniel said, gripping her arm with surprising strength. They are afraid of us, Admiral. Not our ships. Not our weapons. They are afraid of what we are. Of what we do for each other. Admiral Sullivan looked at the 9 other survivors, at their injuries and exhaustion and the fierce light that still burned in their eyes. These people had been tortured and studied and told they were weak. And they had responded by tearing apart a Vraxian research station and escaping into the void. Then, we will give them something to really be afraid of, she said. Daniel was in the medical bay for 3 weeks. The plasma burns healed slowly, leaving scars that would never fully fade. He did not mind the scars. They reminded him of what he had survived, of the people who had died so that others could live. Craig visited him every day. The man had lost 3 fingers in the escape, but he joked about it constantly, saying he had never been good at counting anyway. Lisa came by to check on his treatment and argue with the ship's doctors about the best way to handle his injuries. Amanda brought him books and news from the other survivors. They had become a family in that Vraxian prison. Nothing would ever change that dot when Daniel was finally released from the medical bay. Admiral Sullivan called into her office. She offered him a seat and poured 2 glasses of something strong and amber-colored. I have been reading the reports, she said, about what happened in that facility, about how you organized the other prisoners, about how you turned 17 scared people into a force that accomplished the impossible. I did not do it alone, Daniel said. I could not have done any of it alone. That is exactly my point. The Admiral leaned forward, her eyes intense. The Vraxians have been studying us for 50 years. They have been trying to understand why their simulations keep showing humanity winning. And you just demonstrated it perfectly. I do not understand. You made them a family, Lieutenant. You took 17 strangers who had nothing in common except their species and their suffering, and you made them care about each other. You made them willing to die for each other. She shook her head slowly. The Vraxians cannot do that. They do not know how, and it terrifies them. Daniel thought about Vark's Tal, about the confusion in those 4 alien eyes when he had watched Daniel cry over Catherine's body. The Vraxians were powerful. They had weapons and ships and technology beyond anything humanity could match. But they had no concept of love. They could not understand why a creature would sacrifice itself for another. What happens now? Daniel asked. Now we go to war, Admiral Sullivan said simply. The hegemony has been watching us, waiting for us to grow strong enough to be a threat. Your escape has forced their hand. They will attack soon, before we can build more ships or make more allies. Can we win? The Admiral smiled, and there was something fierce in it. 6 months ago, you were alone on an alien moon with a dying friend and 12 bullets. Now you are sitting in my office on the most powerful ship humanity has ever built. If anyone can tell me whether we can win, Lieutenant, it is you. Daniel thought about Catherine, about her smile in those last moments, about the birds she had heard singing that were not there. He thought about the 7 people who had died in the escape, about their faces and names and stories. He thought about the 10 who had survived, who were even now scattered throughout the Resolution, healing and recovering and getting ready to fight again. The Vraxians do not understand us, he said slowly. They think crying makes us weak. They think love is inefficient. They cannot imagine dying for someone else. He looked up at the Admiral, and his eyes were hard as stone. That is their weakness, Admiral, not ours. We can win because we have something worth fighting for. We have each other. Admiral Sullivan raised her glass. To each other, then. To each other, Daniel agreed. And to the ones we have lost. They drank together as the Resolution continued its journey through the stars, carrying its crew toward a war that would change the galaxy forever. And somewhere in the dark, the Vraxian hegemony was watching. and they were very, very afraid. The war began 3 months after Daniel's escape, and it was not the war the Vraxians expected. Humanity did not try to match the hegemony ship for ship. They did not build giant fleets or create superweapons. Instead, they did something the Vraxians had never seen before in 300 years of conquest. They made friends. The Keth were a reptilian species who had been enslaved by the hegemony for 2 centuries. Their homeworld was a mining colony now, their people forced to dig precious metals from the ground for their masters. When human diplomats arrived at their world, the Keth expected demands and threats. Instead, the humans brought medicine. They brought food. They brought engineers who helped repair broken machines and teachers who offered to share human knowledge freely. "Why do you help us?" the Keth leader asked. "What do you want in return?" "We want allies," the human ambassador said simply. "We want friends. We want to show the galaxy that there's another way to exist. The hegemony rules through fear. We would rather build something together through trust." The Keth joined the war within a month. The Mirren were next. They were a species of tall, thin beings with skin like polished silver. The hegemony had conquered them so long ago that most Mirren had forgotten they had ever been free. When human ships arrived in their system, the Mirren were terrified. But the humans did not come with weapons drawn. They came with open hands and open hearts. They learned the Mirren language. They ate Mirren food. They danced Mirren dances and told Mirren stories and treated them like equals instead of subjects. One by one, the species of the galaxy began to see that the hegemony was not the only option. There was another path. A harder path, perhaps, but one that led somewhere better. Daniel Hayes was promoted to commander and given a ship of his own. The vessel was called the Phoenix, and its crew was made up of humans and Keth and Mirren and a dozen other species who had chosen to fight. Together, his first mission was to liberate Velen 4. The moon looked different from space than it had from the ground. Smaller, less threatening. But as Daniel stared at it through the bridge view screen, he felt the weight of everything that had happened there pressing down on his chest. "Commander," his first officer said, "the Vraxian garrison is requesting we identify ourselves." "Tell them Commander Daniel Hayes of the Allied fleet sends his regards," Daniel said. "And tell them they have 1 hour to evacuate before we begin our attack." The garrison evacuated in 45 minutes. Daniel went down to the surface with a small team. They walked through the purple forest, following the path he had run so many months ago with Catherine in his arms. The cave system was exactly as he remembered it. Dark and cold and silent. He found the spot where Catherine had died. Someone, probably the Vraxians, had removed her body. But Daniel had brought something to leave behind. It was a simple stone marker, carved with her name and a few words beneath it. Catherine Moore, specialist, friend. She was brave to the end. Daniel knelt beside the marker and placed his hand on the cold stone. He did not cry this time. He had done his crying. Now there was only a quiet peace, a sense of a promise finally kept. "I told you I would come back," he said softly. "I told your mom you were brave. I told everyone. They know, Katie. The whole galaxy knows." He stayed there for a long time, alone with his memories, while his crew waited respectfully at the edge of the cave. The final battle of the war took place above, the Vraxian homeworld itself. 200 ships faced the massed might of the hegemony. Human ships flew alongside Keth vessels and Mirren cruisers and a dozen other designs from species that had been enemies for centuries, but had learned to fight together. On the bridge of the Phoenix, Daniel stood beside Admiral Sullivan and watched the enemy fleet arrange itself for battle. There were thousands of Vraxian ships, more than the Allied fleet could ever hope to match in raw numbers. "They are broadcasting," the communications officer reported. "It is Vorax Tall. He's asking to speak with you, Commander. Daniel felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, curiosity, and something that might have been respect. Put him through. Voraxtal's image appeared on the view screen. The Vraxian commander looked older somehow, smaller, as if the years of war had drained something vital from him. Human, Voraxtal said, you have done what our simulations calculated to be impossible. You have united species that have been enemies for thousands of years. You have built an alliance from nothing but words and kindness. How? I told you once, Daniel replied. Humans do not cry because we are weak. We cry because we have been strong for too long. And when we are done crying, we get up and we keep fighting. We bring everyone who needs us along with us. That is not natural, Voraxtal said. That is not how the universe works. The strong conquer the weak. That is the only law that matters. You are wrong, Daniel said. The strong protect the weak. The strong lift others up instead of pushing them down. The strong build families and communities and alliances, not empires of fear. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentle. That is what you never understood about us, Voraxtal. We are not strong because we are unbreakable. We are strong because when we break, we put ourselves back together and keep going. The Vraxian commander was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his head. The hegemony surrenders, he said. We cannot defeat an enemy we do not understand. And we cannot understand creatures who would die for each other. The war ended that day. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed beyond recognition. The alliance became a federation, and the federation became a union. Species that had fought each other for millennia learned to live together in peace. The old empires crumbled, replaced by something new and strange and wonderful. Daniel Hayes never took another promotion. He remained a commander, content to lead his ship and remember the names of everyone who served on him. He visited Velenfor once a year, every year, to sit beside Catherine's marker and tell her about everything that had happened. He married Lisa, the doctor from the research station, and they had 3 children who grew up speaking 4 different languages and calling aliens aunt and uncle. Craig became the godfather to their youngest, and Amanda flew the shuttle at their wedding when Daniel was 97 years old, surrounded by his children and grandchildren and friends from a dozen different worlds. He closed his eyes for the last time. His final words were spoken so softly that only Lisa, holding his hand as she had held it for 60 years, could hear them. Tell Katie I kept my promise, he whispered. Tell her I came back. Lisa kissed his forehead and let her tears fall freely. She knows my love, she said. She always knew. The humans cried at his funeral. They cried for days, great gatherings of people from every species in the Alliance, weeping together for a man who had shown them what it meant to love. And then they dried their eyes, and they got up. And they kept building the galaxy that Daniel Hayes had dreamed of, because that is what humans do. They cry beside the dying. They mourn what they have lost. And then they rise from the ashes and create something new, something unnatural, something impossible, something wonderful, something human. The end.